Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday. It is September. It's both Thursday and September. It's Thursday and September 1st, as a matter of fact. In fact, it's Thursday. It's September 1st. It's 2022. Put all those things together, you have the date. And, by all indications, the time as well. 9:01. And going on 9:02. These things will change. That is the progression. It's the way they go. Good morning. Welcome to September. I don't know. Fall is upon us. It will be Labor Day weekend this weekend. I guess we got to have plans on whether or not we're going to come back on Monday or we're going to take the day off and labor no more or who knows what. But we'll make those plans. Greg Dworkin will be here today. It's Thursday. Last shot at getting a little bit of extra news in via that route. So we're looking forward to that. Plenty to catch up on, of course. More filings from the former guy, because, of course, he has made the mistake of moving for a special master to be appointed. And he may, in fact, get that special master. It's just that along the way, the filing has given the Department of Justice the chance to open fire at Donald Trump and the rich target environment that he provides. And then we have to wait for him to answer, and then his filings come in, and they're always, well, comical, and you begin to wonder when he might go out and get some real attorneys, etc., etc. This one seems to be better written, this answer. Not better reasoned, but better written. So more eloquently put garbage, I guess, this time around. Plus, of course, there's election news. I'll wait for Greg to bring in all the exciting stuff, and I'll cover all the mundane, I suppose. All right, well, let's see. Plenty going on here. By the way, I take note this morning of another weather anomaly in Moscow. It's raining Putin enemies once again. A Russian oil magnate of some note, not here on this show, not ones that we've noted in the past, but a magnate of some note who has unbelievably fallen out the window of a hospital in Moscow. We don't know whether he was in the hospital originally for falling out another window or not, but it's going around. It's contagious in Moscow. The new Putin policy of defenestroika, as I'm calling it. Okay, that's what happens when you get too close to the window and fall through the glasnost. And, well, you know. It's really unbelievable. And obviously they're doing this thing over and over again to send a message. I guess the poison thing wasn't as exciting and interesting as throwing people out the window over and over again. But, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. But anyway, yeah, it'll crush your faith in the existence of a deep state here in the United States if you really think that they're the kind of people that will go to any lengths to preserve their power. No one falls out windows around here. It just doesn't happen. Even when people steal lists of the top spies in operation around the world for the United States and then leave them around for people to find at your swingers club down in Florida. Nothing happens. It just it doesn't work that way. Okay, let's see. Plenty of other things to round up as well. Greg has a long list, I'm sure, already and developing. Let's see, other things any other quick hits? Oh, yes, I'll at least note for the record, because we haven't really spent any time on this aspect of Trump's complaints, but just to bring us up to speed, this was something that they spent a good deal of time on yesterday in Trump camp. Those pictures of all the documents spread out on the horrific carpet. And I apparently there are a number of journalists scrambling to try to figure out exactly what room in Pervalago has that horrible carpeting. And I don't know. I guess this is a mystery to them. But Trump's approach to this, and it's caught on too. It's made headway. People are actually making this same mistake. But Trump wanted everybody to know that he didn't leave those documents lying around on the floor, and that the FBI, in his opinion, had spread them out on the floor for dramatic effect and to make it look like he was so sloppy with secret documents that he left them all over the floor. And I don't think that was anyone's, impression of what actually happened. But, well, as it turns out, there are a couple of people who really, I think, did guess that was what happened. But when the FBI seizes evidence, they take pictures of the evidence. And the fact that they laid it out with the little scaling device and a label that I think was said 2A, that's their evidentiary label, and this is Exhibit 2A or whatever it's going to be. It wasn't, that's not how they found it. That's just how they displayed it, but that's how they display everything. They always do that. They always take pictures of that evidence. Police departments all the time will lay out the things that they've seized in a raid. Totally standard procedure, but he was making it out to be like they had done something weird and outrageous, and they haven't. And just in case you were falling into that trap, I don't know exactly what's going to happen if you're in that trap. I think you just fall in the box and you stay there until you say, I should leave this box. It's not a very dangerous trap, but it's out there, and I think it's wrong. And just wanted to update you on that. In other news, important things have happened, and Greg Dworkin has collected a small sampling of them. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. Your Honor, my client is innocent on the grounds that the FBI was messy.
Yes, that's the real problem. I did see a lot of people poking fun at that, and the staged police station shot of like seized drugs, cash, guns, etc. is very common and I think very familiar to most people. I saw people tweeting around such pictures yesterday saying, "Hi, this isn't how I left my drugs. I'm innocent."
That's
the
right.
Cops planted it. Well,
I had them neatly stored with people's names on it, and you just put them all in the middle of the room.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
That's crazy. And that's not
These
where
are branded.
He left them.
You can't mix them together. They cost different things.
That's true. And plus, I think he's just mad that people saw and criticized his carpet.
Well, what he really wanted to do is to have the FBI take pictures of his cartons. Mm-hmm. Because he had all of his documents stored in cartons, he said.
Cartons. Oh, cartons.
And the thing is, by admitting that he had all his documents stored in cartons and the FBI messed him up because he would never leave them on the floor like that,
or in the
it's
toilet.
essentially admission that, no, they weren't planted. Yes, he really had the documents, which, by the way, is not good for him any more than one of his lawyers going on Fox News or one of those shows and saying, this is ridiculous having that stuff on the floor. I've been in Trump's office. There's lots of people in that office. Hint, hint. These were not secure documents, and non-secure people had access to them, including me, who doesn't have clearance. Right. And I never saw him put this stuff on the floor.
Right. Well, duh. No one said he did, and
you weren't supposed to say that because that could be used in a court of law against you. You are now a witness.
Right.
And how can you be his lawyer when you're a witness?
Well, you know what? I don't want to do him any favors by getting rid of his lawyers, but yeah.
Well, he's doing it himself. He's not using the Putin defenestration plan. By the way, if Dante had actually had a 10 circle of hell, Putin would be in it, and it would be made up of high-rises with the windows open.
Yeah, that's why they love the high-rise buildings that Trump makes.
Because they're foolproof. The poisoning is somewhat uncertain. You can poison somebody and then they recover.
That's
not good.
They occasionally
But you don't recover from a 9th-story defenestration.
No, not typically. Yes, the long-term prognosis, not good. And you can calculate the time of how much time have I got left? Well, at negative 32 feet per second, I would say about not long.
So we'll get back to Trump and his legal issues, and we'll even touch on the Ukraine war. But I wanted to start by being pro-fish and talk about the Alaska election, which we have mentioned on the show because, we love Alaska here.
Right. And
reasons. One of the reasons, of course, is I tend to love any place I've actually visited, like Iceland and Alaska.
Right.
Because you really appreciate some of the subtleties that you don't otherwise get by just understanding that Sarah Palin is from Wasilla. What's Wasilla like? What's it look like?
I want to go see. And you feel better about those people.
Yeah, they're nice people. It's a little town surrounded by beautiful mountains. It's absolutely drop-dead gorgeous. And by the way, she may have won Wasilla. I didn't check. But she lost an election there. As Dave Wasserman notes, Mary Peltola, Democrat, defeats Sarah Palin, Republican,
Mm-hmm.
in the Alaska at-large special election. Final margin, Peltola defeats Palin 51.5 to 48.5. In the final round of ranked choice, huge victory and pickup for Democrats, driven more by Palin's unpopularity than national trends. And what he means by that is that this is ranked choice voting, sometimes called instant runoff voting. It's ranked choice because it's really not instant. In Alaska, you have
Certainly
to wait for all the ballots to come in, so it took until the end of the month, as we told you on the show. And the end of the month was yesterday, so they went ahead and looked at how people wound up, and it turned out Peltola was in first place, Palin was in second place, and the third place person, Nick Begich, Republican, was dropped,
Right.
and his votes were assigned to various and sundry places depending upon how his voters ranked their second choice. And here's how that rank went. Palin picked up 50% of the votes from him, which is to say only 50%.
Right.
The rest of the votes went
Republicans,
elsewhere.
50% of Republicans wouldn't choose her even as a second choice.
His voters could not stand her.
Right.
That's what Wasserman is saying. Okay. Peltola picked up 28.8% of the Republican Begich voters.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit more about ranked choice voting and how that works out in a moment. No second choice, which is to say what they call, term of art, exhausted ballots, 20.9.
Okay. I think we used to call it
20.9% of Begich's votes didn't rank a second choice.
Mm-hmm.
And you might turn around and look at that, especially if you're a partisan Republican who likes Palin, and say, this is ridiculous. 20%. That means they didn't really understand what was going on. No, that's not what it means. And we know that from looking at what happened in the first state that did this, Maine. And I was checking Jared Golden's stuff and Janet Mills' stuff. And it turns out in Maine, depending upon whether or not you have a heavyweight race or everybody's interested in, you might get the 7% exhausted or wasted ballots. Or if you're looking at, let's say, what are the second choices for the nutcases that are also running but didn't make it?
Yeah.
Their first choice would have been the nutcase, and 35% of the second choice was nothing.
Yeah, I'll take.
So if you're like a Ron
nutcase
Paul
or nothing.
voter, it's Ron Paul or nobody else.
Right.
So anywhere from 7 to 35% of the votes are exhausted. So for 20% of the votes to be exhausted in a nasty primary, in effect, in Alaska for between Begich voters and Palin voters, that's not surprising at all. It actually fits exactly where you'd be.
Right.
And it's not because Alaskans didn't understand it. It's because they didn't like Palin.
They understood that.
Right? That's why only 50% voted for Palin. And those, one quarter of them, 28% voted for Peltola from Begich's ballots there. That's because in Alaska, ranked choice voting meant, and there's some stories about this, that there was a penalty for negative campaigning. Peltola is really nice. She actually gets along with Sarah Palin. There's a story floating around, it's been in the press, that on the day of voting, it was rainy and cold, and Palin texted Peltola, I've got my rain gear on, it's really cold, dress accordingly. And Peltola said, that is just like so Alaskan. So I knew to dress warm and go out that day because that's what we do up here. There is just a premium on being nice.
Well, all right.
And when you're doing ranked choice voting and you start attacking each other, then the people you attack are going to say, you're really being a jerk. I'm not going to vote for you. And they didn't. And that's why Palin lost.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Share the weather report, I guess, if you want to.
But these things matter. All politics is local. Rating change, Dave Wasserman. In the wake of Mary Peltola's defeat of Sarah Palin, Cook Political will be moving Alaska at large November rating from likely R to toss-up. I've never seen something move that much.
Yeah.
They didn't go to lean R or I think R or a little bit pink.
Probably.
They went like toss-up.
Well, all right. That's pretty good. Yeah, the result here, even though it's just for the special election and means you're only in office until January, but then they're going to rerun the race, et cetera, basically rerun the race, but it'll be a brand new one. But yeah, there hasn't been a Democrat in that seat in the House, maybe ever since statehood, I think. But certainly Don Young occupied it since forever, and maybe actually that long. I don't know. I'd have to look back and see whether there was somebody else at any point. But anyway, it's been a long, long time, certainly since there was any Democrat in that House seat. And that'll be a nice change. And good, yeah. I also saw a lot of people grousing that, well, this meant that, a much larger percentage of Alaska wanted to have a Republican in the seat. More ballots were cast for Republican candidates than Democratic candidates. And how can it be that. But really, any way you slice it, even if it hadn't been ranked choice voting, but a three-way race in the third place.
Would have won.
Yeah, I mean, she came out ahead on day one, and then they split up the second choice ballots, and she won again.
Jerry Golden was trailing, but this put him ahead.
Right.
So people were really upset about that, particularly the folks that lost, but then they put it to the Maine voters, and the Maine voters, 60% of the exit poll said, no, we like it. Keep it.
Well, so they were in favor of it. I'm sure they would have had a similar result there in Alaska if they had to ask the question, but they didn't. She won kind of wire to wire there. And great, that's good news. And guess what? Sometimes the party that garners the most votes, the party doesn't get to choose who the actual winner is. And sorry, that happens from time to time.
In fact, is part of the story there.
Yeah.
And in fact, I have a piece dated April 4th, 2022 from a site called AlaskaLandmine.com.
No.
Is Alaska ready for ranked choice voting? And they were talking about getting ready. And for the most part, they said they were.
Well,
and so, Alaskans may see a bit more congeniality between candidates than normal. Voters in Maine have seen less negative campaigning, said Kyle Bailey of Ranked Choice Maine. Especially at the local level, there's definitely a lot of cross-endorsement, plenty of make me your second choice messaging. This is one of the explicit designs of ranked choice voting. Some things haven't changed. And curiously and optimistically for ranked choice proponents, some of these analyses say that simultaneously and independently conclude that voters in Maine had little problems understanding the system.
Okay.
And then this piece goes on to say this is the part of ranked choice voting that distresses Alaska politicos the most. So if they try to bamboozle you into thinking that you're supposed to vote the way we tell you because it's complicated, and you make it simple for people, or actually more appealing for people, more people vote, and they don't necessarily vote the way the politicos want. That's the point.
Okay.
That's why they do it.
Weird.
Another very important thing about Mary Peltelli you need to know, yes, she happens to be indigenous, and probably, as far as anybody can figure out from my Alaska friends telling me this, probably the second non-white person to represent an entire state. The first one is Dan Inouye of Hawaii.
Oh, okay.
And she's the first woman. But she happens to be extremely pro-fish.
Pro-fish.
That was part of her whole appeal for non-Alaskans, for those of us in the lower 48. This is from The Independent in the UK that was covering this. Meet the pro-fish Democrat who's leading against Sarah Palin in deep red Alaska. Mary Peltola pulled ahead in the first round. Can she keep her lead? The answer is yes, she can.
All right.
But she was campaigning on being pro-fish. Firstly, she said, I feel that Alaskans, like most Americans, are tired of the negativity and the partisan divide in Washington. I think one of the reasons my message is hitting home is because they know I have a long history of bipartisanship. In fact, she's made bipartisanship a centerpiece of her strategy, and she's perhaps the most outwardly pro-fish candidate currently running. More on that.
Well, I still, like bipartisanship with fish? Is this what this means? I don't understand.
Yeah, well, look, salmon and the fishing industry are enormous in Alaska.
Well, sure.
And one of the big deals over the last 4 or 5 years, it was even going on when I was visiting there, was Pebble Mine and Bristol Bay, which is a salmon fishery.
It is.
And the mine would have polluted the bay. And being pro-fish is like a big deal up there.
It's a complicated issue.
The kids, in first grade, learn the 5 kinds of salmon using their fingers.
Oh.
Really? The thumb is the chum, and the middle finger is king, and the little pinky is pink salmon. I mean, the pointer finger is sockeye because you could point somebody's eye at. I mean, these are the things you learn.
All right.
So being pro-fish is like a big deal up there. Again, all politics is local.
Yes, including, I guess, what being pro-fish means. I mean, the idea is
And she's proud of it.
catching them and eating them, right? I mean, like the fish don't
But they
consider
got to
that
live
to
and they
be
got to thrive in order
pro-fish.
for you to do that.
Yes, right. So we're just keeping you alive to eat you later. It's a mixed message for the fish. The fish don't vote, so it's fine.
Right. Fish don't have yard signs.
But yeah, right.
Partly because they don't have yards.
It's partially true. But they could be float around with them, whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's a mixed message for the fish. But I get you. Pro-fish, you want to have conserve the environment so that the fish are around, so that we can, be anti-fish at the end, at the dinner table.
So here's a subtle message.
Anti-fish.
Peltola was talking about how she and Palin get along.
Okay.
And why they get along. And she said her first 2 years in office coincided with my last 2 years as state representative. And we both happened to be pregnant with our last child at the same time. She and I work very well together. I do have a sense of camaraderie.
Yes.
We all want to live in a home that's safe and peaceful and loving. We just have so much in common. And that's very true in this race. Sarah and I are aligned on many issues that face Alaska, she adds. Mm-hmm. And what's the subtext there? Women have friends and they talk to each other.
All right.
If you don't think this post-Roe, post-Dobbs things is real, we'll get to that probably after the break.
Okay.
But all of this matters. The fact that they bonded when they were pregnant, these things are important to people.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Ms. Peltola recounts a text message she received from Ms. Palin on Election Day, illustrates how the race has played out. She'd been out sign waving, and she said, "Hey, best of luck today. I just had to duck home. My hoodie's soaking wet. It's cold out there." And I was just so happy to get that text, Peltola said, because I knew I had to wear my long johns, that was from Sarah Palin, and really be prepared for the elements. And that's such an Alaskan-friendly heads up they give each other.
All right.
That's what you do in winter, right? Hey,
Good.
It's not minus 35 the way you thought. It's minus 45. You better dress accordingly. These are important.
Yeah, well, I guess so, and that's nice. And I'll be interested to see whether Palin returns the favor and stays congenial.
Well, we'll talk about congeniality also, because after all, Begich lost.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And so
what was he wearing?
Begich was not happy about losing.
Okay, well, I mean...
Nick Begich's statement piling on Sarah Palin. The biggest lesson is that ranked choice voting showed a vote for Sarah Palin is in reality a vote for Mary Peltola because Palin simply doesn't have enough support from Alaskans to win an election. Don't forget they're running against each other again in the fall.
Yeah.
They don't like each other, and when you read that comment, you realize, maybe there's something to the fact that 20% of his ballots were, as the term of art says, exhausted, which is to say, didn't vote for anybody.
But now, of course, some 20+% of ballots for him next time from Palin voters won't have him as a second choice either.
And that is why ranked choice voting is supposed to promote being nicer.
Yeah. Well, as long as they keep killing each other, terrific.
Right.
They're close to Russia. People might start falling out of windows. Not a lot of tall buildings, though.
Right. So I'm going to send you an image.
All right.
And it's a Mary Peltola ad.
Oh.
Fish. And it has Mary Peltola in a car riding on the highway, and ahead is one of these big highway signs. And the main road says, talking about how I'm the Democratic candidate running against Sarah Palin. And the off-ramp says, fish.
And she goes there.
And she goes there, and she says, we know what Alaskans really want to talk about. And the article says, this is not to say there aren't clear differences between her and Ms. Palin. Ms. Peltola has pointed out she's the only candidate to support a woman's right to choose.
To fish.
But she doesn't want to talk about Palin. And the thing she wants to talk about is fish.
Well, all right. I mean,
right? In a state like Alaska, being pro-fish is a vote winner. It's one of the most bountiful fishing regions in the world. The industry directly employs 58,000 people. It's a lot in Alaska.
It's the whole thing.
And produces more than $5 billion in economic activity. And salmon represents the vast majority of that industry.
Well, all right.
She grew up,
Ms.
Peltola did, along the Kuskokwim River, where fishing was vital. And the native people who lived there, of which she is one, appreciated the rural southwestern town of Bethel, where she moved when she was 13, has seen its fishing stocks decline dramatically over the years. Our fishing's a shadow of its former self. It's really gone downhill, and we don't even have enough to meet our need for food security. The other species, besides red salmon, Well, king salmon, they've been in decline for at least 13 years. Chum salmon's really fallen off the map.
Oh, yeah,
If
sure.
you're from Alaska,
Oh,
you know the different kinds of salmon.
Right. I don't
And
like
so
salmon.
I'm thinking
So,
when
sorry.
she gets to Congress, she's going to be a great voice for environmental issues.
And fish.
And fish.
Which is the same thing. All right. Well, that's good. It's, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not a big fish eater, which is a pro-fish position. I just want
I'm trying to give you a little local flavor here, you know?
Yeah. Well,
If you don't like the way fish tastes, I can't help you.
Right. I mean, I'm not going to win any elections there. I will be, you know what? Oh, I will maybe president of the fish, possibly, if they get a chance to vote. I'll be way up there for not eating them. I don't bother them. I don't try to hook them out of the water. Nothing.
I can just see how well you do up there. My opponent doesn't like fish. He says they don't have yard signs.
Yeah.
Vote for me. I like fish.
Yeah, I may lose, but I will text you with the weather in the morning. So,
Yeah, well, that's also good.
Yeah.
That's the Alaska story, and it's big.
Mm-hmm.
And so
So is
it's
Alaska.
funny because I think Charlie Crist resigned his House seat in order to concentrate on running for governor in Florida.
Yeah, okay, did he?
And so everybody was saying, well, now Pelosi only has a majority of 3 instead of 4. And then like in an hour later, oh, well, it's back up to 4.
Okay, and she's bringing fish,
And yeah, that's right.
which
Fresh fish.
may or may not. Make a
Chances are
difference,
it's going to be salmon. I'm just saying.
I think so.
And I have to tell you, when I was visiting places like Seward, a little drinking village with a fishing problem up in Alaska,
Right.
The seafood was absolutely fantastic.
Yes, well, it came straight out of the sea. So, I've had some good foods. I know that when our favorite Alaskan bloggers have occasionally years ago visited the Netroots Nation gatherings, which was just passed not that long ago in Pittsburgh again, and they brought some fresh seafood, things that I never liked, just all of a sudden tasted a whole lot better. Some great scallops.
Yeah, Wall Street Journal poll after the break.
Okay, stay tuned. Fish too. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, where we're trying to research the 5 kinds of salmon. We're trying our best to remember all the, I think we got 4 of them named, and we'll look up the 5th kind of salmon, and we don't know which finger it's for.
Yeah, well, it could be
the ring
silver
finger?
salmon, where
Silver.
where the ring goes.
Oh, yeah, okay, that could be. Right, yeah, my knowledge of salmon has to do with whether it's lox and smoked or not. That's about it. Nova. That's how that's the salmon I know. I don't like it.
Locks.
Right. And that's fine. All right. Well, at any rate, it's good to know all the different kinds of salmon. Salmon are your
Anyway,
neighbors.
let's finish up with
Moving on.
Alaska by pointing out that Dave Wasserman had the scoop there. And, you've seen those maps from Trumpers saying, if you look at this map of America, you'll see that 97% of it is red and only 3% on the coast are blue.
Like salmon. Yeah.
But Wasserman pointed out, after yesterday, the land area that Democrats represent just went up 104%.
Ah, excellent. That's cool.
That's
Big-
Dave Wasserman humor.
big
Of course,
blot
he was
of
being
blue.
subtle about it, but that was actually pretty funny.
I like it. Yes.
All right. Less subtle is a quick political report coming out with House ratings today.
Love
Alaska
houses.
at large goes from likely R to toss-up, as we mentioned, but also Arizona 4, Greg Stanton, a Democrat, goes from lean D to likely D. All of these are in the Democrats' favor.
All right.
Maryland 6, David Trone, lean D to likely D. New York 3, which is an open seat, toss-up to lean D. And Virginia 7, Abigail Spanberger,
Hey.
everybody's favorite moderate, goes from toss-up to lean D.
which she's opposed to because, of course, as a middle-of-the-road moderate, she wants it to remain
She
toss-up
wants it to
forever.
remain a toss-up.
That's
yeah,
right.
Exactly. So Wall Street Journal out today with a poll. The Democratic improvement was notable. On the generic ballot, they lead 47-44. It's an 8-point improvement since March. With Indies, Dems lead 38-35. That's a 15-point improvement since March.
Okay.
Biden leads Trump in a hypothetical rematch of the last presidential election, 50-44. They had been tied in March. In the test match, Mr. Biden leads among independents 46-38. So that's pretty impressive. Democratic midterm prospects improve as the races heat up, Wall Street Journal poll finds. There's a lot going on. This is from the Philadelphia Inquirer. More Republicans back Josh Shapiro for Pennsylvania governor. The list of Republican backers for Shapiro, the Democratic nominee, is growing. It's from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Michael Chertoff. Remember Michael Chertoff? Secretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security under W. Said he considered Mastriano a real threat to the values of the rule of law.
Oh. Well,
I know what he's articulated, said Chertoff. It's not much of a mystery. He's not hiding his views. He's, in fact, courting people who think we should revisit 2020.
Yeah.
James Schultz, former associate White House counsel for Trump, on Monday published an essay in Philadelphia Magazine that rejected Mastriano due to his 2020 election claims. He noted that party organizations such as the Republican Governors Association have not come out in support of Mastriano.
Oh, I did not know that.
The Democratic Governors Association is running ads all over the country about how extreme these Republican candidates are.
Yeah, they don't support him either.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's
other Republicans announcing their support for Shapiro on Tuesday include Mario Severa, former state rep and former chair of the Delaware County Council, former Bucks County District Attorney David Heckler, former state reps Raymond Blunt Jr., Jim Kelly, Beverly McGrath, and J. Scott Chadwick. 2 Republican-run super PACs are already organizing advertising campaigns to draw GOP voters away from Mastriano in favor of Shapiro. That's all pretty good.
Yeah, I mean...
And then there's the national outside money, too.
Right. Well, that is something. I mean, good.
All this is going on while, as the Politico piece puts it, a defiant Rick Scott explains strategic disagreements with McConnell over battle for Senate. If you trash talk our candidates, you hurt our chances of winning, said Scott, and you hurt our candidates' ability to raise money.
Yeah.
Right. And then NRSC Chair Rick Scott, Sahil Kapoor notes, wrote a new piece in Washington Examiner. Unfortunately, many of the very people responsible for losing the Senate last cycle are now trying to stop us from winning the majority. So, in other words, Rick Scott is running another scam. You might call it the Health South election. Health South is the healthcare group that Scott was responsible for.
And used to steal all the money.
Governor Rick Scott took responsibility, says the South Florida Sun Sentinel. No, he took $300 million. When the federal investigation of Rick Scott's former hospital company became public in 1997, the board of Columbia HCA forced him out. Scott left with $300 million in stock, a $5.1 million severance, and a $950,000 per year consulting contract for 5 years. What does Scott call that? Taking responsibility.
And all the money.
Yeah. So they've named and renamed themselves, and, a lot going out there. Speaking of hospitals, though, that's also in the news in Georgia. Inside the political fallout of an Atlanta hospital closure, a healthcare group called WellCare, I think it is closing Atlanta Medical, which is in the middle of Atlanta Medical Center's right in the middle of Atlanta, of course. It's something like 450 beds that they say is going to close. 8 rural hospitals have shut down in Georgia over the past 10 years, but news that the Atlanta closure brought the trend to the capital city. Stacey Abrams has already brought it up, as has Raphael Warnock. Abrams says it's a choice to cost Atlanta 460 hospital beds. It's a choice to reject money we've all paid for. She's going after Kemp for refusing to expand Medicaid.
Okay.
And so she's making it a campaign issue. And that'll be quite interesting to follow.
Good. There are a lot of there's a lot of issues between the two of them, and good. Georgians need that choice.
Right. And Warnock's making an issue too.
Good.
Herschel Walker will, he's pro-tree. Well, actually, he's anti-tree.
We have enough trees. Just as if he had said we have enough fish, he would have been clobbered.
Yeah, maybe he's anti-fish too. I have to find out.
Yeah.
This is from Politico as well. Republican super PAC drops $4 million in New Hampshire Senate primary. The spending is to support a moderate GOP candidate in the primary to challenge Maggie Hassan.
Why?
Mountain PAC, a super PAC that filed Tuesday, has purchased at least $3.5 million of television ad time. They're supporting Chuck Morse, who's running well behind in polling behind Don Baldock, an Army Brigadier General who's a nutcase.
Wow, okay.
And has closely embraced former President Donald Trump's false stolen election conspiracies. Baldock will probably be the primary candidate. Note,
I see.
These are
okay.
Republicans who are trying to influence the Republican primary. You know, this false tear stuff. Well, Democrats just want the extremists to win, and that's extremely dangerous. Actually, it's Republicans who want the extremists to win, and that's why he's leading in the polls there. So no false tears, crocodile tears here for what Democrats do.
All right.
And, of course, the story that's always the main story, abortion rises in importance as a voting issue driven by Democrats, says Pew. This is from August 23rd. Biden job approval remains low. A declining share of voters say he will be a factor in their midterm vote. For those pundits who are fixated on Biden's approval rating, those same pundits fixated on it refuse to acknowledge that his ratings are going up in most polls.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is the voters say, I don't care whether you focus on it or not. I got other things going on. And, you know, I may or may not like him. I think maybe he didn't go far enough or maybe he'll go too far. And that's got nothing to do with the fact that Republicans are nuts and I'm not voting for them.
Yeah, anytime
Why do you keep bringing up Biden? Biden's not on the ballot, but Trump is.
He isn't, but he is. Yeah. And look, I'll tell you what, anytime I see Biden's name on the ballot in 2022, I'll vote no. How about that?
The majority of registered voters, 56%, say the issue of abortion will be very important in their midterm.
Yes.
So, you know, that's why you have a hashtag, Rovember.
Oh, good, clever.
If you're not familiar with it, you'll be seeing a lot of it.
Not.
Republicans were cruising and Democrats are having a hard time. This is the Wall Street Journal poll. Said Republican pollster Tony Fabrizio, who conducted the survey along with Democrat John Anzalone. It's almost like the abortion issue came along and was kind of like a defibrillator to Democrats. At 60%, those who say abortion should be legal in all or most cases represent a majority of voters, up 5 percentage points from March, and more than half of voters say Supreme Court elimination of federal constitutional right to an abortion has made them more likely to vote.
Okay.
In a separate question, voters cited the court ruling as the single issue most likely to make them vote this November ahead of 4 other issues tested, including inflation, border security, gun violence, and the FBI.
Ranked choice voting for issues.
Right? The court ruling was especially salient for white suburban women, a group known for switching between the two parties and who say they would back a Democrat over Republican 52-40.
Yeah.
Mr. Fabrizio said that in the midst of the intensified feelings over abortion, the poll recorded a meaningful movement toward the Democratic Party among women in some groups, such as Hispanic voters and independents. This is real, folks. And so, you know,
big mistake,
the thing that, you know, just gets me at this particular point in time, I used to be on the pundits' back because they were fixated on Biden's approval rates, which really aren't all that low.
Right.
30s are low. Mid-40s, not so low.
Typical, as you said.
That's actually fairly typical. We talked about that on the show a couple of days ago. But that's not the point. The point is he's not the one that's going to decide whether people vote. There's more important things going on. And for those male pundits who don't get how important and salient abortion is going to be in this election, who keep saying things like, well, you know, Democrats have been trending better over the past couple of months. But what if it reverses? What's going to reverse? The Supreme Court? They're not reversing. This is on the ballot now. It's driving things. It's going to be on the ballot in November, and it's driving things. Why would you think it's going to reverse? Sure, it's possible. I get that. But any story that says, but, you know, it could always go the other way, has to include, but it could also get a lot worse for Republicans.
I guess that's true, right? It's only fair and balanced to say it could continue to get worse.
But they don't do that. They only talk about the fact that, well, at this particular point in time, they look like they're doing okay, but what if it goes the other way?
Yeah, well, it won't be a reversal in fortune on abortion. I mean, it could be that they come up with some other issue that is more salient somehow, but
like Trump, like the January 6th committee, which is having hearings in September.
Yes.
There's
nothing on the
where
horizon,
support by Biden is actually a winning issue because Ukraine is winning the war. What are you talking about?
I don't know. They'd have to come up with something. They'd have to have a plan for something, anything, which they haven't had in decades.
It's an October surprise 3 days before. Come on.
I don't know. I'm not sure what convinces them, but yeah. Well, I mean, they totally misunderstood the dynamics of the abortion question from the beginning, so it doesn't surprise me that they still haven't recalibrated yet. I mean, I guess that the fact that they're surprised, for instance, well, suburban white women, they've been traditionally, they switch back and forth, so they could be winnable again, and it's just, let
me go back to Pew.
Yeah.
A majority of registered voters, 56%, say the issue of abortion will be very important in the midterm, up from 43% in March, and virtually all of the increases come among Democrats.
Right.
71% of Democratic and Democratic-leaning registered voters rate abortion is very important. Fewer than half said that in March. By contrast, views among Republicans and GOP leaners have shown almost no change.
That's because they were overly saturated. They've been abortion-only saturated to the gills for decades. There's no room for growth for anti-abortion forces among Republicans.
Right. The two parties are essentially tied in midterm voting intentions. 44% say for Democrats, 42% say for Republicans. A larger share of Republican and Democratic voters say they've given a lot of thought to the upcoming elections. That's standard and typical. We say that every 2 years. Republicans get engaged early, and they get fixated early, and they're more enthusiastic early. They watch Fox News. That's all Fox News talks about. Democrats are actually going to work, living a life, having a job, doing all the things that people do, raising kids, worrying about stuff.
Yes, thanks
and
to
they
birth
only
control.
tune in late. Especially because they're younger voters who aren't retired and they have more things to do.
Right.
But Democrats are now almost as likely as Republicans to say it really matters. And so keep an eye on all of this.
It is. It's very interesting. The whole, just as an issue, of course, captures our attention because of the importance of it. But what a side story, the misinterpretation by, mostly male pundits who just,
it won't really matter.
Grasp
it's a
it.
1 or 2 day issue.
It's pretty interesting. And it's interesting that they focused on the, I don't understand it. Suburban white women, why they went the other direction last time.
And by the way, the Wall Street Journal poll says that Biden support is up among younger voters.
Oh, well.
I wonder if the student loan thing has anything to do with that, or the environmental stuff that he passed.
Right. Could be anything, any number, or probably a combination of those things.
Well, and the environment is really important, and we need a new generation of leaders like Joe Biden to get us
fish. Right. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think that's what's doing it among younger voters.
I don't think that's what's doing it either, but I'm saying,
Yeah. All right. Well,
whatever he did, he's got younger voters engaged. I'm thinking of student loans.
I'll ask him after. I'll let him vote first, and then
back to Donald Trump and his legal issues here. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but there's a fellow named Brandon von Grack.
No.
Former Department of Justice, National Security official.
Are you sure?
Including the FARA unit chief, prosecutor for a lot of espionage and secret leaking. He's an expert.
Sure, okay.
Acknowledged expert in the field. In fact, he was having a very interesting conversation with our friend Marcy Wheeler the other day. And Marcy credits him with pointing out Marcy rarely credits people because she doesn't suffer fools gladly. Not because she doesn't credit people, but because, when you get a credit from Marcy, you actually did something good.
Yeah, it's not just puffery. Okay,
right, exactly.
Yeah, gotcha.
So she said, Brandon brought up a really interesting point. One of the reasons that it would be difficult to prosecute Trump, not for obstruction, that's clear, not for owning or pretending to own stolen documents, that's pretty clear.
Yes.
But trying to prosecute him for espionage because the documents he have are so damaging to the United States, that would be difficult. And the reason it would be difficult is you would have to reveal the contents of the document in order to convince a jury that, yeah, you shouldn't have done that.
Yes.
And some of these things are so secret, you can't. They would have to Men in Black, neuralize you.
Well, I see what she means. Yeah.
Right? So Brandon says, the thing here is that the prosecutors will be going through looking for Goldilocks documents. And a Goldilocks document is not so secret that if you revealed it, it would hurt the United States, but secret enough to make the point. Mm-hmm. So if you get your hands on Goldilocks documents, that's what you take to court.
I see.
Otherwise,
if you
just take them for having stolen material and obstructing the look for it.
That's
search for it.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, that's if you want to prosecute them for actual espionage, not the violation of the Espionage Act,
right,
which doesn't by itself constitute espionage.
That's just an official secrets act. But if you actually want to get them on espionage,
well, sure,
then you have to be prepared to tell people what it is they stole.
Yes. Which, by the way, is all the explanation you ever need if you're still scratching your head about why violation of the Espionage Act is a strict liability or possession crime, and you don't have to prove the intent. That's the reason. If you have secret documents and we're worried about what you're going to do with them, but you can't convict anybody unless you reveal the secret to the jury, that's pretty self-defeating. But if you don't have to, if you design the law so that simple possession of the documents is enough to go to jail, at least for a little while, that's a law you can use. And that's why the Espionage Act reads that way.
So, my point in telling that story is that I think it makes the point that Brendan von Grack's pretty sharp analyst and worth paying attention to.
All right.
And he says...
Von Grack's or Grack?
Brendan von Grack.
Okay, so that was Grack is a guy. Listen, okay, I wasn't is that with an X at the end? Grax. Okay, no, Grack. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt the flow there, but...
The former president, he says, the former president's reply tonight, which is to say replied to the nutty judge who actually was considering appointing a special master for reasons that are unclear other than she's a Trump appointee. The former president's reply tonight is sobering. 24 hours ago, DOJ described in detail its compelling need to conduct an unprecedented search of a former president's residence, and those details were left uncontested. So, in other words, he went through the filing that you pointed out was probably better written, but still light on substance.
Yeah, it was eloquent.
And said
written.
It's light on substance.
Yeah. Well, it didn't do much, and apparently so light on substance that the upshot is the only arguments on the table about the necessity of the search are coming from the DOJ. There's nothing from the movant's side, and there never was going to be anything, that would argue against having allowed the search, which is kind of dumb since, well, that's not what they're asking for. They're not looking to exclude evidence, and I guess they could still make that motion at trial, but then people will ask, how come you didn't make that motion so much earlier? But
so this is from Washington Post. Jackie Alemany, Josh Dorsey, Devlin Barrett, Perry Stein, all of whom have been on this case. Justice filing points for new legal trouble for Trump and lawyers, experts say.
Yeah.
Prosecutors allege that Trump's team misled them about whether FBI agents were given all classified documents from Mar-a-Lago. Every time they go on TV, we talked about one of the examples there. Trump is saying that these things were planted. Maybe they were planted. Well, because look at that mess they made on the floor. That's ridiculous. When I was in his office and I saw stolen documents all over the place, they were on his desk.
Right.
Wait a minute.
In his hands.
You are trying to help him?
Yeah, I don't know. Are they telling us, though, that that's where the carpet was? Why is this such a mystery where this carpet is?
Prosecutors allege Trump's team misled them about whether FBI agents were given all classified documents. Look, you can't lie to the FBI. That's an open and shut thing.
Yeah, not
only
Trump's not
are you
in
not
office.
Supposed to have stolen documents, that's an open and shut thing. And you can't make a case to this or any other judge and think you're going to get away with it on appeal or otherwise, that my documents should be returned to me when, in fact, they are not your documents.
Right. Well, that
is a point of fact. Okay? You can't lie about whether you possess them or not, which these lawyers did. So why they're still his lawyers, I don't know.
Yeah,
One of them,
There are no other ones.
Bob, used to be a commentator on OAN.
Right.
And the other one, Habib, used to be a parking lot lawyer.
Right.
Parking garage expert.
Yes. I loved her work in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Very funny.
Yeah. Let alone Watergate, when she was arranging those meetings down deep in the parking garage.
All the parking garage material we've got. There you go.
There's no way to predict whether the Justice Department will ultimately pursue charges against the former president or his associates, although I would add it's looking like they will any day now. There's an argument about whether or not it would be before or after the election. I think after the election, not because of a stupid 60, 90, 30-day, 15-minute rule, but rather because these things take time to put together.
Yeah.
And they're very thorough.
That's probably
They can do it
true.
fast. They showed that, but they like to be thorough. In a court filing Tuesday night, government lawyers recounted numerous instances in which Trump's lawyers allegedly misled government officials during the investigation and in which Trump or his team appear to have haphazardly handled materials. Oh, well, he was in the office and I saw people in there all the time and he never had them on the floor.
Right. They were just in front of all the visitors, people who had won their local, beauty pageant or what have you.
Left unanswered were key questions that could determine Trump's legal fate. Did he direct Corcoran and Bob to mislead the government either before the FBI raid or of his Florida home? And if so, why did he want to keep reams of top-secret classified documents there? It's bad, said Peter Lapp, a former FBI agent who worked on espionage cases. It's all pretty damning. Well, yeah.
Damn.
I would say so.
Dang.
This one from Greg Sargent. The damning new DOJ filing implicates Trump more deeply than ever. Has a picture of the famous carpet at this particular point in time.
Yes.
Redacted FBI photograph of documents and classified cover sheets recovered from a container stored in former President Donald Trump's Florida estate, which was included in Justice Department filing. Key moments in the Mar-a-Lago saga. You could squint at emerging revelations and conclude that Donald Trump himself might not be directly implicated. Perhaps they failed to fully account for documents when archives officials came knocking. But the key takeaway from the Justice Department latest filing is that this notion is getting impossible to sustain. The new filing implicates Trump himself in the hoarding of national documents more directly than anything else. Two big revelations in the TikTok implicate Trump in a fresh way. First, we now have clear insight into how classified documents were kept at Mar-a-Lago after Trump's team turned over a bunch to the National Archives. And it now appears more likely that Trump was involved in deceiving law enforcement about it.
Okay.
After the missing documents were subpoenaed, Trump lawyers met on June 3rd, showed them more documents. The filing notes that Trump's own lawyers treated these documents as classified, and that undercuts Trump's claim he magically declassified them. What's more, on that day, Trump's lawyers gave agents a sworn statement declaring a diligent search to locate any and all remaining and relevant documents had been conducted. This characterization was being delivered on behalf of the office of Donald J. Trump.
Who's that?
And that suggests the statement reportedly signed by lawyer Christina Bobb was authorized by Trump himself. Of course, that's wrong, but still.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't true that they had done that. And there was another search that another of his lawyers has alleged was conducted in a different case and also.
Yeah, for the New York case with Tish James.
Right. And I think that's the parking lot attorney made that representation that she had personally conducted a search of all of his residences for documents relevant to the New York case, which then led people to say, so you searched his desk and everything? Like, did you see anything marked top secret while you were in there? Oh, not talking about that. Not relevant to the disclosures we're making in New York. And true, she doesn't have to, but somebody's going to ask that question eventually. And
I suspect it'll be the Department of Justice in some form.
So that's not good.
So Andrew Weissman says, is it really
things.
the case that for 18 months, nobody, including counsel, ever discussed this with the president or took direction from him? Noting that the filing says some of these documents were interspersed with personal items. Weissman told me prosecutors can now ask the court for permission to subpoena Trump's lawyers.
Yes.
In order to directly ask whether Trump authorized the original statement. And Trump's lawyers are now potential witnesses. Yeah. And the idea that Trump wasn't in the loop on all of this is inconceivable. You shouldn't have used that term.
No, you do not.
You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
All right. Well, none of these things mean what he thinks it means. So good job making yourselves the story, Trump lawyers, if that's what you really are. If that's your
New
real
York Times version of that, Trump's lawyers renew push for special master, a filing claim that the Justice Department was criminalizing the former president's possession of his own presidential records.
Well,
which the Times says stands at odds with the Presidential Records Act. He stands at odds with the facts and with the law.
Act. Yeah, I mean everything. That's pretty crazy. Now, we're not criminalizing it. We're just reading you the code. And by the way, the one who raised it to felony status was you. So, don't know what I can do to help comfort you about this. This is you set this trap for yourself and walked straight into it. I don't know.
Right. That was a Maggie Haberman piece. This one in the New York Times, a little bit more to the point. Trump's legal jab left him open to Justice Department strike. Or as Mike Tyson would say, everybody has a plan until you punch him in the face.
Right. Yep.
All right,
He punched himself.
Now, Trump?
Yeah. Well, he never had one from the beginning. So this is going to be very interesting and exciting as they take apart his defense.
And in the 30 seconds we have left, I should point out there's also stuff going on in Ukraine where there seems to be an actual offensive on the part of the Ukrainians. It is far more likely that in these very early days, that a successful counteroffensive would appear to be stalling or unsuccessful for some time before its success becomes manifest. That's Understanding War, the Institute for the Study of War. So don't assume just because 15 minutes into their offensive, you now know how it's going to work. We don't even know if it's a feint. Right. We don't even know if the Kherson offensive is where it's really taking place. Maybe it's Kharkiv. We don't know. The whole point of a feint is to make it think it's in one place, so you can't tell whether it's succeeding or failing until you know what actually is going on.
Right. It's all happening at Windows.
Keep all of that in mind.
All right. Yeah. So, all right. Not too much. Don't do instant analysis of something as major as a counteroffensive in a land war in Europe.
Yeah, when you're only getting your information from Twitter.
Right. In Asia, you can do whatever you want. Okay. Thanks, Greg. We'll check in with you again. Oh, we have to discuss at some point what to do about Monday. So we'll do that next.
Inconceivable.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. A lot to follow up on, a lot to cram in the next hour. By way of follow-up on the mention earlier in the show of yet another Russian oil magnate falling out of a window, just to let you know who it was in case you're keeping track or in case you live under this guy's window and you're now thinking, I can take the canopy down because he's already dead, falling out a different window. The chairman of Lukoil, and that's a fairly major player, Lukoil, and they even have gas stations here in the U.S. I've seen them. The chairman, Ravil Maganov, or maybe Maganov, I don't know how to pronounce my Russian, but he is the, as they say in the Daily Beast's subheader for their piece on it, that he's the latest, just the latest, to join a long list of bizarre deaths plaguing figures in the oil and gas industry. And that's where the money is. So, fell out a hospital window, allegedly. Allison Quinn reports for the Daily Beast. Just to get a flavor for what this guy was about. A top Russian oil executive, which I guess means oligarch / mobster in Russia. I don't know. See, Putin's giving Russian businessmen a bad name. They need to get rid of him. A top Russian oil executive died Thursday after purportedly falling out of a hospital window, according to local reports. And I don't know how it is in Russia. You know, the building code could be different, but generally speaking, in a modern, newly constructed hospital here in the United States, it's very difficult to get those windows either open at all or open wide enough for anybody to fall out of one. But like I said, could be different in Russia. Ravil Maganov, maybe. The chairman of the board of Lukoil, Russia's second largest oil company, is said to have fallen out from the 6th floor of the Central Clinical Hospital in Moscow. The 67-year-old is just the latest Russian executive linked to the oil and gas industry to die in bizarre circumstances in recent months. Russia's RIA Novosti reports that the hospital confirmed his death and said investigators were working at the scene, though no further details were provided on how he died. Maganov fell out the window of his room at the hospital this morning. He died of his injuries, an unnamed source cited by the Interfax news agency said. The press service of Lukoil also confirmed Maganov's death, making no mention of his fall out of a window. We are deeply saddened to inform you that Ravil Maganov passed after a serious illness. It's a window falling. But, I mean, I guess he was in the hospital for a serious illness, and they just couldn't wait, or the illness wasn't serious enough for Putin. And so they've piled the window disease on top of it. Ravil Ulfatovich, it's his middle name, I guess, Ulfatovich, made an invaluable contribution not only to the development of the company, but to the entire Russian oil and gas industry, the company said in a press release quoted by Interfax. And it was so invaluable that they killed him. Anyway, in the wake of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in late February, Lukoil took the rare step of, here's the issue, condemning the war. Telling shareholders in a letter at the time that the company stands for the immediate cessation of the armed conflict. Or, if necessary, the immediate cessation of me, Ravil Ulfatovich. Okay. I guess they took him up on that. And they immediately terminated him instead. Well, not immediately. They waited 6 months. Maganov's death sudden death comes just a few months after Alexander Subbotin, a former top Lukoil executive, you can't even quit and survive, was found dead in May. An investigation into his death is said to be ongoing, wink wink, though Russian state media put out a number of bizarre details at the time, citing sources who said Subbotin had been found dead in a shaman's home where voodoo rituals were performed and that he'd been severely intoxicated. Just a month earlier, okay, ready for some more Russian, let's see, Vladislav Avayev, the former vice president of Gazprom Bank, a privately owned subsidiary of Gazprom, was found dead of a gunshot wound in Moscow. Very traditional. Along with his wife and daughter. Wow. Investigators say they suspected a murder-suicide. A day after Avayev's body was found, Sergei Protosenya, the former deputy chairman of the gas company Novatek, not Novichok, but Novatek, was found hanging in a villa in Spain, with his wife and daughter also found dead, on the premises with stab wounds. Just as in the case of Avayev, local police said their preliminary theory was murder-suicide. Goodness. In February, Gazprom executive Alexander Chulyakov, let's say, was found hanged in his St. Petersburg garage, with police saying they'd discovered a suicide note near his body. His death came just a few weeks after Gazprom Invest executive Leonid Shulman was found dead at a cottage in the Leningrad region. Leningrad? With law enforcement sources also describing his death as a suicide. The Leningrad region. Did they not change the name of is Leningrad Oblast or something? The region where Leningrad used to be, or it still is, but is now called St. Petersburg, but they didn't change the Oblast, or is this just a slip up, back into, I don't know. I'd have to look that one up. But that's not really important. What's important is also everybody is dying, not even falling out the windows, but suicides. They're hanging themselves and stabbing their family. This is really kind of crazy. And, I mean, it's obviously meant to send a message at this point. And message received. But, I mean, the message needs to be received by all the other mobsters in Russia who will just say, I have to stop thinking I or my family are safe. Putin's going to murder my entire family eventually, maybe for no real reason whatsoever. So it's probably best that we get together and murder Putin at this point. Just saying that's how the calculations would go among mobsters. I have no recommendations for you. I don't know what your situation is. I'm just saying I would expect that. If I were an analyst offering you where I think things are headed in Russia, I would certainly advise you're probably going to get murdered. at some point by Vladimir Putin and his people. So what you want to do with that information is up to you. But if you're half the oligarch I think you are, half the mobster I think you are, then you'll come up with a solution. But anyway. And I mean, I guess maybe that's why Putin's health is so bad. He can't go to a hospital anywhere, or someone will accidentally have him trip and fall out a window. So he's foregoing medical treatment as a result. I don't know. I'm just guessing. Anyway, oh yeah, follow up on Russia. I mentioned yesterday that I don't know what the hell I'm talking about when it comes to Russia. Don't listen to me. I don't know. And I said that by way of not having any particularly good insight to offer you on the death of Mikhail Gorbachev, except to say that it is Russia we're talking about, and at that time, when he was the leader, Soviet Union. And, they're inscrutable people who end up running Russia or the Soviet Union, and it's difficult to know whether our impression of him as a lovely gent who brought about the end of the Cold War and started a Pizza Hut commercial could be anything but a good guy. But I suspect that you don't rise to the level he achieved without pushing a few people out of windows. I mean, basically is what it comes down to. And I wondered whether he was just a guy who somehow managed to stumble into the upper leadership of the Communist Party in the Soviet Union without doing that, or whether we just didn't know about it, or whether lots of people knew about it, except that's just taken as a given for rising to power in the Soviet Union or Russia. I don't know. Gary Kasparov probably knows more about Russia than I do, and more than many people do, being a Russian and all. He made a comment yesterday, and I don't know whether he's followed it up with the promised peace, but he starts by saying, I'll have a peace on Gorbachev soon. But this paragraph from Winter is Coming, is that a blog or book or I don't know what, but it's offered up like that way. It sums up his thoughts. Gary says he was obliged to embark on perestroika as a last gasp to save the USSR and socialism. Gorbachev became an accidental hero in the West for failing, that is to say, failing to save the USSR. And the screen grab clip that he's talking about here reads, Gorbachev's desperate attempts to preserve socialism in the Soviet Union eventually failed utterly, turning him into an accidental hero in the West. I won't even give him the minimal credit some offer for not sending in the proverbial tanks to crush the anti-communist uprisings that were taking place all across the Soviet bloc, especially since Gorbachev did send the military to Latvia and Lithuania, where he believed he could get away with it. He was hardly a risk-taker where his own neck was concerned, and he didn't want to end up like, Romanian communist dictator Nicolae Ceausescu, whose rapid overthrow and execution in December of 1989 was still fresh in everyone's mind. And, serves as an example for people looking to get rid of Putin. Just saying. That's out there as well. So I don't know whether maybe Winter is Coming is even I don't know what it is. Is it Gary Kasparov's own book? Possibly. I don't know. But, at any rate, that's what he's crediting for it, even if it doesn't tell me what the hell that is. He goes on with a couple more linked tweets. Let's see if they're about the same subject here. The misplaced adulation of Gorbachev received, and his current standing also draws proper respect away from Boris Yeltsin. Interestingly enough, I mean, in the West here, we don't have that glowing a view of Boris Yeltsin, that he was kind of a bumbling weirdo himself, but that's interesting. Maybe we just misunderstood that, or maybe that was also true, but something else happened. So the misplaced adulation Gorbachev received in his current standing is also drawing proper respect away from Boris Yeltsin, who, for all his flaws, the ones we saw, right, as a statesman and a person, was a democratic believer and fighter in his heart at key moments in history. Gorbachev endorsed Putin for a decade. And then his critiques of Putin's destruction of democracy in Russia came well after the point when his voice might have made a difference in drawing international attention. But I think probably Gorbachev was smart enough also to know that if he spoke up at a point when his voice might have made a difference, then he wouldn't have lived this long, and he would have fallen out a window some point earlier. As a young Soviet world champion and beneficiary of perestroika and glasnost, I, Gary Kasparov, pushed every envelope of repression to test the suddenly shifting limits. It was a time of confusion and opportunity. Gorbachev's attempt to create socialism with a human face failed, and thank God. Okay, well, very interesting. That is an indication that it's a more complicated picture, as we suspected it would be, because we suspect everything is overly complicated. So anyway, I just wanted to sort of double back on that one. And, I don't know. Say it was true that some people had more complex thoughts still to come on the subject. I should actually check in on Kasparov's Twitter account to see whether he finally did come back and say something. Oh, and by the way, his pinned tweet features the cover of what is, yes, his book, Winter is Coming, Gary Kasparov. The subtitle of the book, in case you're interested in knowing that and then therefore interested in reading the book, is Why Vladimir Putin and the Enemies of the Free World Must Be Stopped. Sounds like something we could probably get along with. So there you go. And but did he come back with anything on his Twitter feed with regard to a longer piece about the unraveling the no, I guess he didn't. Unraveling the mysteries, the many layers of Gorbachev and how we should regard him. Well, he hasn't yet, but other people have come back with praise for his comments, and he's retweeted that. So, okay, that's where we are. Speaking of things we want to call back to that we mentioned earlier in the show, I have this article from Politico, which focuses on the parking lot attorney and her sworn statement about having conducted this search in the New York case, which will now implicate her in the DOJ's case about what was going on at Mar-a-Lago. Here is the piece, the title, Days Before Mar-a-Lago Subpoena, the subpoena, that would be the June thing, not the search warrant from August. Trump lawyer claimed she scoured his office, closets, and drawers. That's pretty specific. A filing by Alina Habba in the case over Trump's business empire, that's the New York case, could create exposure in the matter of classified information being stored at the ex-president's home, the Florida case. Kyle Cheney on the beat again for this one. And I guess before I launch into this article, I will point out something that also has come to my attention that is, well, similar in, I don't know, it has something to do with the same subject matter, which is the sworn statement handed over by, I think it was Christina Bobb, who saying, we've made a thorough search of Mar-a-Lago for classified materials, or rather the materials that the Justice Department and the Records Administration and the archivists were interested in getting back. And I guess it seems like the statement was a little more narrow than it's being interpreted after all, although now I should try and call up the thing itself. And I think it was, let's see, Ira Goldman who had made mention of it. I hope it's not too far back in his tweet thread. But yeah, I think, oh yes, right. So I think the statement was being read overly broadly as being, I searched all of Mar-a-Lago to determine whether or not there were any more classified materials still being stored here, however you want to put it. But in fact, the statement said, I searched the boxes. That is, the boxes in the storage room. And so it might be that he or she swore to a more narrow search than she's being credited for, and she might actually be able to get away with that claim after all, except for the fact that, she'll be able to get away with part of the claim. She won't be held responsible for the documents that were perhaps in his office and in his desk drawers. But I guess whatever's in the boxes that she said she searched, she'll still be on the hook for that one. So Anyway, I'll return to that and I'll leave Ira Goldman's Twitter thread open. But let's get back to the more organized thoughts being expressed over at Politico by Kyle Cheney. Here's the deal. Just 6 days before the Justice Department subpoenaed to recover highly sensitive documents housed at Mar-a-Lago, it's a good way of putting it, housed, one of former President Donald Trump's attorneys scoured the estate. And by the way, it is Armando's opinion that it's actually more likely that she didn't scour the estate, but merely lied about having scoured the estate so that she could make this representation to the New York State courts. Either way, there's going to be a problem for her. It's just what will be the scope and nature of the problem. But as he's reporting it, taking her word for it, he says one of former President Trump's attorneys scoured the estate searching for records in response to a separate legal matter. The attorney, Alina Habba, told a New York State court that on May 5th, she conducted a search of Trump's private residence and office at Mar-a-Lago that was so, quote, diligent, it included, quote, all desks, drawers, nightstands, dressers, closets, etc. She was looking for records in response to a subpoena issued by New York Attorney General Letitia James, who is investigating matters related to the Trump Organization. Now, on the narrow issue of whether or not she found anything responsive to the New York case, she can probably say, and get away with saying, that she found nothing. But a more interesting case, obviously, will be, well, if you looked in every single one of the drawers, although it may be true that you did not see anything that was responsive to the New York case, did you, while you were in there, happen to see these large envelopes marked in red and yellow and orange type, gigantic type, that said top secret or secret or whatever else, SCI and all the various codings? I mean, there's no mistake. If you've seen the picture, what these envelopes look like. And did you just did you pick them up and look under them and say, nope, nothing from New York, nothing to see here, and move on? Or did you really not do the search, and so you're just going to be in trouble for filing false affidavits in the New York case? I mean, I guess that's the least problematic route to go. Now, you either saw that there was information being, well, I mean, I guess you would say, I saw things that said top secret, but I figured the guy used to be president, and he says he declassified them, so I just, I took him at his word. Maybe that's the way to thread the needle. I don't know. But we'll see whether, whether she gets caught up under whether you saw something that you knew or should have known needed to be reported to federal authorities. And it'll hang up on, well, what do you mean by should have known? The former president said it was fine. And I didn't do any research to see whether the former president was out of his mind. Well, maybe you should have, but I don't know whether that's to be expected or not. Anyway, back to the story. The same filing, the New York filing, also includes an affidavit from Trump himself indicating that he authorized Alina Habba to search my private residence and personal office located at the Mar-a-Lago Club in Palm Beach, Florida, for any and all documents responsive to the subpoena. Habba indicated she conducted similar searches at Trump's residences and offices in his Bedminster estate, which, by the way, I think the FBI ought to be searching there, and Trump Tower, and pretty much every Trump property at this point. There's no reason to believe that he hasn't stashed secret documents there as well. And in other places, like, I don't know, under the ground in Bedminster, for instance. The filing submitted to the New York AG's office, Attorney General, of course, raises key questions in relation to the separate Mar-a-Lago probe, chiefly whether Habba ended up handling any of the documents that DOJ later discovered at Trump's club, and if so, whether she has the clearance to have done so. In her sworn affidavit, Habba said that she searched many of the locations that would later be scrutinized by the FBI during its August 8th search of Mar-a-Lago, and where investigators say they encountered a significant volume of highly classified government secrets. The documents, those investigators stated, had colored cover sheets indicating their classification status, making clear their significance. And that, I gotta pause again to say what other dangers that raises for Alina Habba. Like, for instance, this is the line of questioning, I guess, as I would pursue it up in New York. I would say, so, while you were making this thorough search, supposedly, of Trump's office, desk, drawers, nightstands, closets, everything else, did you ever encounter anything that said top secret? And if she says no, which is a possible answer, right? It's possible, right? Unlikely, but possible that at the time she searched the drawers, there's no top secret documents in his desk drawers. And the top secret documents only make their way to the desk after March, whatever it was. March 6th, March 5th, May 5th, rather. Sorry. And so sometime in between May and August 8th, they end up getting moved there. But I don't know. If Trump is saying he wasn't really handling the stuff and wasn't moving it around much and was just storing it and even know what was in the boxes, that argues against all of that. If the stuff is moving around from the boxes in storage between May and August and they end up in his drawer, you might ask some questions about why did they end up in the drawer. But not in New York, they wouldn't ask these questions. But for New York, they ask Alina Habba, did you see any of these things? If she says no, then, you then maybe want to try to establish the timeline of when those things ended up there. I don't know if they're ever going to do that. Or they dust them for prints and they find Alina Habba's fingerprints on them. Then you say, all right, well, you say you didn't see them, but they have your fingerprints on them. So now you're in trouble for that. So she may have to admit that she saw them. And this would also raise another interesting point. Well, yeah, I did see them. Okay, so, but did you look in them? No, I didn't, because top secret. I'm not cleared to see top secret stuff. Like, you could see, I don't know if you would be in trouble or if anybody who lets you see the things, I guess they'd be in trouble for letting you access it. That's a problem. Like, which he points out earlier in the paragraph. Trump himself files something in the New York courts that says, I authorized Alina Habba to look in places that I should have known actually contained top secret documents. I may have done so. I may be willing to testify that I trusted her not to look inside them because she's an honorable person, but that doesn't really matter. And when it comes to, like I said, what the Espionage Act makes illegal is giving people access to the documents. Whether they read the documents or not is immaterial for various reasons that we were discussing before. You don't want it to get hung up on the no harm, no foul type of excuse. The real problem is creating the opportunity. It's that dangerous, this material. So anyway, there's a second problem. So if she tries to get off the hook by saying, I saw them and I moved the documents to look underneath in order to see whether there's anything responsive to the New York case, which is what I was supposed to be doing there and which I swore I did look for, but I didn't look inside the envelope. I can't look inside the envelope because obviously it's top secret. But I think by the same token, then I would ask, how do you know that there weren't documents responsive to the New York case hidden inside an envelope that said this stuff is top secret and so therefore don't look for it? And the answer would have to be, well, I don't know that wasn't the case because I didn't look. Unless, of course, they open those documents and find that Alina Habba's fingerprints are on those too, in which case you would say, well, now you're off the hook for claiming you made a thorough search of his desk in the New York case for documents that were responsive to that search. But you are now on the hook for having seen and rifled through this top secret information. Even though you thought you were looking for hidden documents in New York, you actually rifled through top secret information and Trump let you do it. You're both in trouble for that. You see how this could really fall apart for everybody? The filing submitted to the New York AG's office raises key questions. Did I not read this one already? I think I did read this one. Classified documents were found in both the storage room and the former president's office, DOJ revealed in the court filing Tuesday night, also noting 3 classified documents were not located in boxes, but rather were located in the desk in the 45 office, as he calls it. Haba did not immediately respond to a request for comment. I wouldn't either. Press aides and attorneys for Trump did not respond either, but experts in the field predicted that her statement to James's office would generate great interest from investigators. The Department of Justice will surely interview her. That's almost given, I would say, says Andrew Weissman, a former assistant U.S. attorney and member of the special counsel Robert Mueller's team. Haba indicated in her New York filing that she uncovered no records responsive to the subpoena issued by James, which is focused on separate matters from whether or not the president improperly took or stored classified documents. Haba has been one of Trump's most vocal defenders on Fox News and in other pro-Trump media outlets, decrying the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago as a political attack with no legal basis. There's a bit more, perhaps after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see what else there is in the end of this Politico article here. Just to be certain there isn't some other reason to think that they're all going to jail. Let's see. Where did we leave off on this? Let's see. Just 6 days after Haba said she examined every corner of Mar-a-Lago, the Justice Department then subpoenaed any and all documents or writings in the custody or control of Donald J. Trump and or the office of Donald J. Trump bearing classification markings. After that subpoena was issued, Trump indicated that he responded by ordering staff to conduct a thorough search of the property for documents marked as classified. Okay. Interesting by itself. I guess this also, just since we're considering all possibilities, raises the possibility that what if Alina Haba actually did conduct that search and then consequently actually did spot classified documents, or at least document covers, in Trump's desk and told the FBI, and she's the source for their further searches. One, the issuance of the subpoena, and then two, later the search warrant. And it's her name that's been redacted out of the affidavit at this point. Although, I guess at that point, you would likely have seen Haba resign from the case in New York, although I guess it does create an interesting ethical dilemma. Like, she's there as his attorney for the New York case. She discovers the presence of classified documents. She has an obligation to report it to the FBI and does so. She would then presumably have an ethical obligation to withdraw from representing Trump in the New York case, I guess, just because she's going to be a witness against him in the Florida case, if she were to have made this report, which I don't know whether I really believe that that's the case or not. But, so the fact that she hasn't withdrawn from the New York, although, there are some really weird, complex ethical issues that you could claim are involved in all this. Like, if I were to suddenly withdraw from the New York case, it would be a very clear indication that there was something terribly wrong, although I don't know that the members of the public would immediately think that there was something wrong with what was going on with document storage at Mar-a-Lago, because we didn't know anything about that one. But it would tend to prejudice the jury pool perhaps in the New York case if she were to suddenly withdraw. But I mean, yeah, I don't know whether anybody would say that the more ethical thing to do was to string this out and try and quietly wind down involvement in the New York case and hand it over to someone else rather than immediately resign. So either there's also ethical charges to be brought against Haba, or ethical charges for not resigning from the New York case, having discovered classified documents during her search, or ethical charges to bring against her for lying about how thorough her search was in the affidavit she filed in the New York case. So there's a lot of problems here. Let's see, where else were we? At a June 3rd meeting at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's attorneys handed investigators a single red-weld envelope, double wrapped in tape, containing the documents, according to the Justice Department. And if I remember correctly, the red-weld envelope, I mean, it's capitalized. I think those are just, they're like filing folders very frequently used in law offices. They're the reddish brown, heavy cardboard, collapsible file folders, accordion folders, sometimes with a flap that folds over to keep it closed and a rubber band that goes around the whole thing. So you'll keep all sorts of legal documents in there, keeps them organized and neat. That's what the red weld folder is. A red weld envelope. So I guess it's a brand name. And I don't know. I've heard it before, having worked around legal offices time to time, but I was never entirely sure where the name came from. But there you have it. So you've probably seen them around if you've ever been in a lawyer's office. And maybe not everybody has, but enough lawyers in my family that I saw them around the house fairly frequently. Anyway, it's a big, heavy cardboard accordion file container for documents. This one they handed over was double wrapped in tape, which I guess was supposed to indicate that they knew, it's being taken to indicate that they knew that there were classified documents inside, which, blows up the whole, these things got planted by the FBI story. But okay. Anyway, so at the June 3rd meeting, they handed over these things and they said, that's it for the classified documents. But DOJ came to believe that Trump's team had withheld and concealed many additional classified documents, which led to the August 8th search warrant executed by the FBI. How could they know it? It could be that they had an informant. It could be that informant is Alina Habba, but probably not. But there could be other informants on site at Mar-a-Lago, or it could simply be a matter of decent record keeping at the National Archives. They have some idea of what paper is produced and brought around to the president, and the fact that it is no longer accounted for is all the evidence that they need. That it's missing, anyway. Whether or not they have evidence that it's at Mar-a-Lago, I mean, where else would it be? That'd be a good place to start. Plus the fact that they have, when asked, handed over classified documents from Mar-a-Lago before, pretty good indication that you might find more there or elsewhere. All right, but anyway, DOJ came to believe that Trump had withheld and concealed many additional classified documents, which led to the August 8th search warrant executed by the FBI. During that search, agents recovered boxes of materials stashed in Trump's storeroom and office, as well as some items marked classified located in the desk of the 45 office, the very locations Habba told James she had searched. Habba's search also came amid increasingly strained negotiations between the National Archives and the Trump legal team over the records housed at Mar-a-Lago. A letter from acting archivist Deborah Steidel, I don't know, Steidel, Wall, on May 10th, revealed that Trump's legal team had been resisting NARA's effort to share documents it had already recovered from Mar-a-Lago with the Justice Department. Well, anyway, sounds like she's got a problem on her hands, and it becomes very complicated, and there's no really good way out and no really good way to escape problems for Alina Habba. Once again, everything Trump touches dies. You work for Trump, you're going to end up in trouble. And good. I'm glad. Let's see. Speaking of other legal wranglings around Trump, I see Kyle Cheney tweeting the other day, and I'm sure he's filed a story on it as well, that John Eastman has appeared before the Fulton County, Georgia grand jury and pleaded the fifth while he was there, in addition to asserting attorney-client privilege, his lawyers say. So there you have it. He's been called to account in Florida Georgia by the grand jury and pleads the fifth. And I don't know if there's anything else we can really extract from that, but there you have it. That's a piece of news that you'll be interested in knowing. Let's see. A piece that I didn't bring to the fore the other day, but maybe having talked about what's been going on in Russia, we might add this. You remember, Greg mentioned, I think the other day, the death of Daria Dugina. That is Alexander Dugin's daughter. And who was this guy? And he's a really creepy, weirdo type of, I guess the philosophical underpinnings of Putinism, to the extent that there are any. He's been responsible for developing them. And this is an interesting sounding piece from CNN. Daria Dugina's death provides a glimpse into Russia's vast disinformation machine, that much we figured on, and the influential women fronting it. That is an interesting angle all by itself. Rob Pichetta writes for CNN here. When a car bomb exploded on the outskirts of Moscow, killing 29-year-old Daria Dugina, the eyes of the West immediately turned to her father, Alexander Dugin, the ultranationalist philosopher credited with being the spiritual guide to Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, among other things, I'm sure. But Dugina herself played a smaller public role in advancing Russian soft power, if there is such a thing, assailing the West in TV appearances at home while operating a disguised English language online platform that pushed a pro-Kremlin worldview to Western readers. In recent years, she had sought to build influence publicly, often with an international audience in mind, and she was not alone. Dugina was one of a number of influential Russian women on the front lines of Russia's disinformation war, representing the public face of the wider propaganda effort, both at home and abroad. There is a huge machine that works for this propagandistic effort, and she was a part of this machine, said Roman Osadchuk, a Ukraine-based research associate at the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab, who has investigated Dugina's writings and digital output since 2020. Which is, not that long ago. But okay. She probably had potential to become an important player, Osadchuk told CNN. Her death provides a window, and look out for the windows there in Russia, into that vast operation, which exists on multiple levels. Dugina emulated the work of high-ranking Kremlin spokespeople, firebrand TV anchors, activists, and countless content creators who, like her, pumped out Kremlin-friendly content on Western-facing blogs and websites, many of which have camouflaged origins. Whatever their reach, the thing that is similar for all of them is the direction of their effort, Osadchuk said. The main idea is to sow division and distrust toward the governments of the Western world, to create further polarization, or to expose problems and divisions in Western societies. It sounds familiar, and we saw an awful lot of it, it seems, during the 2016 campaign, whether or not it was actually coordinated with the Trump campaign. But you saw that they were very clever in trying to exploit racial divisions in the United States and to schedule both Black Lives Matter rallies and anti-Black Lives Matter rallies at the same time so that there would be confrontations in the street as well. Next section, a shady website that lambasted the West. For much of her life, Dugina had followed her father's footsteps, according to Osadchuk. She used her public speeches, media appearances, and website to advance a worldview similar to her father's, which placed a heavy-handed basis on the power of traditions and saw religion as a primary part of governance itself. Very interesting. Problematic here in the United States as well. And for whatever reason, fairly or unfairly, The interest in, or the image of a daughter following in a radicalized father's footsteps brought the Cheney family to mind. Not Kyle Cheney's family, of course, but you know, the other Cheney to mind, even though she's rehabilitating her image these days. Okay. They juxtaposed themselves against the West, which they argued is fighting not for family values, but for, and this sounds familiar, right? For sodomy, sin, and represent the worst in people, he added. We might say pedophilia and sexual traffickers and Satanists and vampires, etc., etc. You get the comparison. Central to her beliefs was a steadfast commitment to Russian imperial objectives. Dugina's own appearances on domestic television placed her firmly in the group of analysts and talking heads who advocated for Russia's war aims on a nightly basis. In one televised discussion before her death, she said the West needed to be nourished by Russia's war in Ukraine in order to wake up from its uneducated worldview, according to a clip posted online by BBC Monitoring. Many are calling her a child, but she wasn't, wrote Kamil Galeev, an independent researcher and former fellow at the Wilson Center, a nonpartisan policy think tank in Washington, D.C., in a lengthy Twitter thread that described Dugina as a propagandist and likened her appearances to a number of Russian male pundits. According to the U.S. State Department, Dugina in 2020 became chief editor of United World International, or UWI, an English and Turkish language foreign affairs site created by the corporatized propaganda effort Project Lakta, Lakhta, which the department says used fictitious online personas to interfere in U.S. elections. How do you like that? The website mimics the format of Western think tanks and news blogs, featuring articles by guest contributors from around the world, and aside from the occasional mistranslation, it bears few traces of its Russian origin. On the surface, it looks like it holds a fringe view of the world, but you couldn't immediately tell that this is something Russian, said Osadchuk, whose investigation in 2020 revealed that social media accounts owned by Dugina were responsible for creating UWI's Facebook presence. But if you go into the articles themselves, you could read it and see the Russian position all over, he added. If Ukraine is admitted to NATO, it will perish as a state, one headline on its site declared. A story published 4 days after Russia's invasion of Ukraine baselessly claimed that Putin was acting in defense of his country after receiving information of an imminent Ukrainian attack on Russia. Another claims that Ukraine's accession to NATO would lead to the disappearance of the state called Russian Federation from the world map. Other op-eds are focused on European affairs, often scathing of Western leaders or emphasizing the growth of far-left and far-right groups in the West. The site worked to give a platform to fringe academics and thinkers, while also nudging Western readers skeptical of mainstream political institutions toward Moscow's worldview, Osadchuk said. The Kremlin propaganda machine has different target audiences. They have their own citizens, but at the same time they need to find allies abroad, he added. This is where Dugina comes in. Facebook said it had removed UWI from the platform in September of 2020 after it received information from the FBI about its activity on other parts of the web. The people behind this activity attempted to conceal their identity and coordination, a Facebook statement said, adding that its probe had uncovered links to people previously involved with the Russian Internet Research Agency, or IRA, the other second, third, fourth, IRA in the several generations of IRAs. That was, of course, the notorious Russian troll farm known for meddling in the 2016 presidential election. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Dugina was also sanctioned by the U.S. and the United Kingdom, along with her father, for her involvement with UWI. The UK government concluded that she was a frequent and high-profile contributor of disinformation in relation to Ukraine and the Russian invasion of Ukraine on various online platforms, and therefore provided support for and promoted policies or actions which destabilize Ukraine or undermine or threaten its territorial integrity, sovereignty, or independence. but UWI remains accessible across the internet, frequently posting Russian-friendly opinion articles on foreign affairs. Its website made no mention of its chief editor's death in the days following the explosion, despite the event dominating global and Russian news channels, nor has it ever acknowledged Dugina or her position on the site. UWI's reach is decidedly middling. It had around 5,000 followers each on Facebook and Instagram before being banned, while a cached version of its auto-banned Twitter account had around 6,800 followers. A new account, which posts articles from the site, is still live and has about 4,200 followers. The problem is that it always could be cascading, Osadchuk said. Even if the website itself isn't that influential, it still provides the ideas and the platform for others to cite it as a credible source. Next up, Russia's disarming young activists in Europe. Websites like Dugina's are not uncommon, according to Olga Lautman, a senior fellow at the Washington-based Center for European Policy Analysis, who labeled their output extremely important to Russia's soft power objectives. It's a very systemic method. You will see all these sites pumping out the same identical message, the same talking points, she said. And we see that a lot here in the U.S. too. The reader reads it in their language. They're comfortable reading it, but they're not necessarily sure where the information is stemming from, Lautman added. The whole point on a bigger scale is to shift the balance of power from the United States to Russia and to allow the rise of authoritarianism and the subversion of democracy. Dugina's interest extended beyond Russia and Ukraine. Her website and talks frequently focused on elections across Europe, and in 2017 she was particularly involved in promoting far-right French presidential candidate Marine Le Pen. In a public appearance before the first round of voting in 2017, Dugina told a Moscow crowd during a talk that Le Pen was a leader for the people, while criticizing eventual winner Emmanuel Macron, according to a write-up by nationalist Russian group Rodina. The fringes of European politics were a space Dugina shared with a number of other young Russian activists and provocateurs, including Maria Katasanova, perhaps, a content creator who set up an online Women for Marine, that is Marine Le Pen, movement, and greeted Le Pen when she visited Moscow to meet Putin in 2017. And Lautman suggests it is no coincidence that young women often find themselves on the front lines of the global information war. Russia has always known how to use women as operatives, she said. Women happen to appeal to a bigger crowd. They are more disarming. In the case of Dugina and Katasanova, they are younger. They can relate to the younger population. I can't picture a group of 20 to 30-year-olds hanging on every word of Alexander Dugin, whereas Dugina is more energetic and can engage more with that group. Especially, of course, if they're young 20-something incels and find Russian women attractive. I'm sure that helps too. On the domestic front, this information. At home, the fruits of Russia's communications campaign are pumped into living rooms via TV sets every evening on a scale that vastly dwarfs the output of younger, largely digital activists like Dugina. State media spin doctors such as Vladimir Solovyov, a popular talk show host singled out by the U.S. State Department as perhaps being the Russian government's most energetic propagandist, figure prominently in the Kremlin's information war, but that effort, too, is frequently helmed by prominent female personalities, experts note, many of whom rushed to pay tribute to Dugina and called for harsh retaliation against Ukraine for her death, despite Kiev's repeated denials that it had been involved in her murder. Lautman pointed to several high-profile women at the top of Russia's news and media apparatus, starting with Margarita Simonyan, the editor-in-chief of state TV channel RT, formerly Russia Today, which was banned from broadcasting in several Western countries following Moscow's invasion. Following Dugina's death, Simonyan said on her Telegram channel that Russia should target decision centers in Ukraine, whatever that's supposed to mean. A January report by the U.S. State Department outlined close ties between Russian government officials and RT and concluded that on RT's television shows, disinformation and propaganda that makes the Kremlin look good and its perceived adversaries look bad is repeatedly stated as fact. Simonian herself has been front and center during many of the Kremlin's spats with Western powers. She conducted the much-derided interview with the two men identified by the British government as suspects in the 2018 poisoning of Sergei and Yulia Skripal, in which the men claimed they were merely visiting the English city of Salisbury to admire the cathedral and its tall spire. After Russia's government claimed to have identified Dugina's killer and said the person responsible had fled to Estonia, Simonian appeared to reference what the two Salisbury suspects told her, joking on Twitter that Russia has professionals who, quote, want to admire the spires near Tallinn, of course, capital of Estonia. Lautman described the media empire that Simonian oversees as very influential, particularly in appealing to older viewers nostalgic for the former Soviet Union. Simonian told Time magazine in 2015 that she has a yellow telephone on her desk with a direct line to the Kremlin, which is installed to discuss secret things. There is no objectivity, she told Russian newspaper, Kommersant in 2012. When Russia is at war, we are, of course, on the side of Russia. The heavily slanted, jingoistic world of Russian state-run TV is perhaps most forcefully occupied by Olga Skabayeva, a firebrand TV presenter who regularly calls for dramatic escalations in Russian attacks on Ukraine and has urged Moscow to demilitarize all of NATO, too. How do you demilitarize a military organization? You fight it on the battlefield, I guess, and destroy it. Well, she has elsewhere said that the rise in the LGBTQ plus population in the West will ultimately mean people will run out in the West as they stop reproducing, and has said Russia will have to denazify trans fascists too. Gee whiz. According to clips compiled by BBC monitoring correspondent Francis Scarr. During Europe's recent heat wave, she said nature is on Russia's side too. Their role is specifically to push Kremlin talking points for Russians, Lautman said. Whatever it is, that's what they will repeat from morning to night. Often those talking points will be first sounded by Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova, who frequently issues fierce statements attacking Western countries alongside the foreign minister Sergei Lavrov. They want to make sure to cover everyone. Lavrov will appeal to some generationally older men, but they have someone for every crowd, and having her as press secretary is powerful, said Lautman. Here you have this younger woman who's taking on these Western powers and isn't afraid of challenging them. Though Dugina and many other women in Russia's misinformation machine operate on dramatically different levels and in contrasting spheres, they definitely look at each other as examples of what and how they could actually work on this. What and how they could actually work on this. Osadchuk said, Dugina's death has shone a light on one aspect of this operation. They are doing this task differently, he said, but they are different parts of the same body. So there you go. Now we've got a rogues gallery of women propagandists in Russia to keep an eye on. And I guess we'll have to wait and see, whether any more of them get murdered anytime soon and who gets the blame for that. Okay, let's see. Other things to sneak in here. Well, there's not a whole lot of time to sneak anything in at this point. But let's see. I'll save some of this stuff for tomorrow that requires perhaps more analysis, and I'll just let you know that this is happening even as I play the outro music fairly shortly. Something reported by the AP from out of Michigan and noted by several people I follow on Twitter. Michigan Election Board rejects abortion rights initiative. How do you like that? Joey Capoletti and Sarah Burnett report for the AP. As quick as I can, here's the gist of the story. A Michigan Elections Board on Wednesday rejected an abortion rights initiative after its two Republican board members voted against putting the proposed constitutional amendment on the November ballot. In other words, like we saw in Kansas and like we're likely to see in some other states, there are attempts to directly intervene and let the voters speak directly to whether or not abortion should remain legal or protected in their state in the face of the Dobbs decision. And even where the voters say very clearly and follow all the rules and say we want to have this thing on the ballot, then Republicans are afraid to have it on the ballot because it'll probably win and it will bring people out and it will remind them that abortion is on the ballot and they'll vote Democratic. So the only thing for Republicans to do is prevent this thing from getting on the ballot. But how? Well, just say no to it. A Michigan Elections Board Wednesday night rejected this thing after the Republicans on the board voted against putting the proposed constitutional amendment on a November ballot. The two Democrats on the state board of canvassers voted in favor, but getting the measure on the ballot required at least 3 votes out of the 4-member board. The Reproductive Freedom for All campaign, which gathered signatures to get the measure on the ballot, is expected to appeal to the Democratic-leaning Michigan Supreme Court in the coming days and expressed confidence it would prevail. The board's administrative and clerical work on elections was once carried out in obscurity, but it drew national attention in 2020 when Donald Trump pressured the Republican members not to certify Joe Biden's electoral win in the state. Its partisan split was evident on another issue on Wednesday when it deadlocked 2-2 on a measure to expand voting, with Democrats for it and guess what? Republicans against. But they gathered all the signatures that they needed to do in order to qualify for the ballot. What was the vote about? No explanation at this point, perhaps later in the story, about why they thought they would be justified in saying no.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Just one more quick thing on this. The proposed constitutional amendment would aim to negate a 91-year-old state law that would ban abortion in all instances except to save the life of the mother, the things that were left behind after Roe was overturned. So, okay, we'll dive into this and more. We still have Friday to go with, and of course, more information yet to come as Justice brings you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next.